I was back in Green Bay because the lease on my student apartment included a landlord who believed a thermostat was a political statement. Also because Dad had started calling clutter entropy, which meant Mom had said the word intervention. March here doesn't thaw, it rots. Slush gathers in the Walmart lot like gray soup. The Packers pro shop flags hang limp and wet. Somewhere out by the river, ice pops like knuckles. Mom met me at the curb with 2 hugs and a grocery bag full of expired coupons, which is how she says I love you. Deal she won't use but hopes I will. Dad didn't come outside. He waved through the living room window like a man behind aquarium glass. He had a dish towel on his shoulder as if that were his job. In Wisconsin, dads carry dish towels the way other men carry pistols. 2 days, Mom said. Maybe 3 if you're sweet. Define sweet. You don't go in the attic, she said, already walking. I laughed. I'm 20. That's why I'm saying it out loud. Inside, the house had that winter smell. Last night's onions plus laundry steam plus the plastic tang of humidifier water. My old bedroom still had the glow-in-the-dark stars I'd begged to keep up after 5th grade. They held on like barnacles. There was a list on the kitchen counter written in Mom's rounded grocery handwriting. Keep, donate, decide later. Dad had written burn at the bottom in his carpenter block letters, then scratched it out so hard he'd torn the paper. Everything that isn't yours, Mom said, goes left side. Your father says the joists on his side don't like surprises. He named the joists, I said. Your father names anything that carries him, she said. Car, ladder, luck. Dad came around the corner wiping his hands. He kissed Mom's hair and looked at me like a project that had arrived ahead of schedule. We'll do 1 run tonight, he said, already tossing a roll of filament tape from palm to palm. Couple boxes, then tomorrow we knock out the rest. Attic, I said and tilted my head. Left side, he said. Don't cross the beam. Dad, there's no beam up there. You'll know it when you see it, he said. And for the first time all day, I felt the small shift of a room getting heavier without anyone moving. We ate chili at the counter with oyster crackers and watched the 6 p.m. news like we were waiting for our names to appear in the crawl. Somebody in Door County had tried to drive a pickup across unsafe ice and made it halfway, a parable we tell ourselves annually. Mom said, people get confident, like confidence was one of the deadly sins. When I was a kid, I thought being watched was a sin. I told the school counselor in 7th grade that I could feel people looking at me when they weren't. He said the brain is a great storyteller and the trick is not believing everything it publishes. Then Mrs. Brand arrived the next year as a 1-day resub and looked at me like I'd been printed wrong. Ripen, she'd said under her breath while a kid in a Justin Bieber hoodie asked if Jesus had a favorite dog. Some nights now, if I'm up too late and the refrigerator motor kicks on at just the wrong second, I hear her voice ride the hum like a passenger. It's not a word you want said to you, not at 14 and not at 20. The only other place I'd heard it was a sign in the produce aisle that told you what avocados were ready to mash and what you had to buy on faith. We did our first run at 8. The attic ladder groaned like it had been waiting to tell us something and forgot its lines. The light up there is the color of dishwater. Dad flicked the pull chain 2 quick tugs, as if he were asking permission, not commanding anything. A small, icy wind came out to greet us with nail polish remover in it. Insulation itches your eyes before it itches your skin. Left side, Dad said and pointed. There was, in fact, a beam, an old floorboard laid across the joists, darker than the ones around it, like somebody had spilled coffee in a straight line. He had stacked banker boxes along that edge, midway between the hatch and the dormer window. On his side, the boxes had writing on them: Taxes 2013-2017, Christmas lights working, Cal's Art K5. On mine, the lids were taped and unlabeled like evidence. We carried two at a time, chunky, careful steps, feeling for the nail heads under the carpet of dust. Somewhere a mouse had been alive long after summer ended, small pellets like punctuation in a language I didn't read. Dad said, "Watch your trailing foot," the way he'd said it when I learned ladders, the way he'd said it when I learned stairs. He was halfway between the beam and the window when his right hand opened like he was trying to catch rain and didn't remember why. The box slid off his forearm. His left hand went to his chest. The sound he made wasn't the TV heart attack sound. It was a surprised little "oh, Dad." He sank to a knee like he respected the house and didn't want to dent it. The box he'd been carrying tipped onto its edge and teetered. He moved to push it with a clumsy urgency that didn't match the rest of his body, the kind of hurry that lives in the hands when the heart refuses to agree. "Mom," I yelled, and the attic turned my voice into two. "Mom, call." The box rocked, settled, threatened to fall toward the darker beam. Dad lunged and knocked it, not away from the edge but forward, trying to push it off the top of a stacked column like you'd knock a checkers piece. His elbow slipped and he went down, shoulder first, sliding an inch, stopping on the beam with the grim luck of a man who has memorized gravity. I was already kneeling beside him, and the only thing I could think to do was stupid. I put my hand on his chest like I could hold a heartbeat in place with pressure. His shirt was warm and damp at the collar. "I've got you," I said, and heard how small it sounded. His eyes weren't on me, they were on the box he tried to shove. "Don't," he said, it came out a dry code. "Don't touch." "I'm not," I said. "Mom, hurry." Her feet on the ladder were the best sound in America. She came up in a rush and took a breath like the air up here had a different recipe. 911 says aspirin, she said, already kneeling. "Cal, down. Bring water, bring the small bottle, the one with the spout." I hesitated because Dad's hand was on my sleeve. He wasn't gripping. He was pleading with the skin of his thumb. His eyes cut to the box again. I'd never seen him scared of an object. He fears storms on the road and wooden ladders on tile. He does not fear boxes. "Go," Mom said, and when Mom says go with her ER voice, you go. On the kitchen counter, the small bottle lived behind the bananas. I filled it, felt stupid for filling it, capped it, ran back. By the time I climbed the last rung, Dad was on his back, breathing too fast like he'd been running in a dream. Mom had a nitro tablet under his tongue she wasn't going to tell me about. She saw the water and nodded toward the hatch. "Stay," she said to him. "Ride it, you hear me." He tapped the floor twice, a carpenter's signal for okay. It didn't look like okay. The siren began as a rumor blocks away. I took the water from one hand to the other, a nervous trick from when I was 8. Mom glanced at the beam, then at the toppled tower of boxes, the one Dad had tried to shove. "Cal," she said without looking at me, which is how you talk when you don't want your words to startle a bad thing. "Step back from those." "Which?" "Those," she said and nodded once at the stacked column. "Please. It's just paper, right?" Mom said nothing, which in our house means the answer didn't want to be heard. The siren grew into a real thing and then cut, like the ambulance had been swallowed by our block. Tires shushed the slush. A door thumped. Boots came quick on the front steps. Mom said softer, "We'll let the professionals climb." Dad's hand found mine. It was a clumsy catch, weak and insistent at once. He squeezed twice like we were on a job site. "Don't touch the box," he said, and in my father's voice I heard a history that didn't belong to plumbing, math homework, or Christmas lights. Something old that had lived in Green Bay before we got here. Something that lived in the dark of March and didn't bother summer. "Okay," I said, because a son will promise anything to a father whose heart is arguing with him. The paramedics had to be told twice about the ladder, and one of them swore kindly under his breath when he saw how tight the hatch was for a man with a bag. Mom did her clipped triage. Pain level, onset, nitro dosage. The female medic nodded like we were all doing a job and she was proud of our teamwork. She said, "Sir, you're going to feel cold," and Dad said, "I'm a Packers fan," and I laughed because if the joke's not funny, you still owe it your part. They got him down in a cradle of bright straps and winter steam, and then it was just me and Mom and the addict's quiet. She closed her eyes and stood with her hands on her hips and breathed 3 times like she'd been practicing for this exact oxygen. "Hospital," I said. "Go," she said, and then she added, "I'll lock up. I'll warm the car." "Go," she repeated, and this time she made it a spell. On the landing, I waited for the attic hatch to snick shut. It didn't. The cord hung, swaying. Upstairs air licked my hairline. I took a breath and went back up 2 rungs. "Mom, just a second," she said, voice turned sideways, like someone trying not to stir a cat. She was standing in front of the stacked column Dad had tried to shove. Up close, I could see the tape had lost its stick and been reinforced with more tape, bands crossing bands until the lid wasn't so much sealed as shamed into staying put. The cardboard had sweated into soft spots, winter breath condensed and dried and condensed again. There was a word scrawled in Sharpie along the side, like someone had written it and then tried to rub it off with a rag. The letters had bled into the corrugation. You couldn't read them unless you wanted to. I didn't know I wanted to until I did. The attic light hummed. Mom put a hand out like a crossing guard. "Cal," she said without looking back, "let's be sweet." "What's in it?" I asked and heard how I sounded, not 20, not 8, but the age where your questions finally realize answers make work. "Not today," Mom said, "please." I stood on the ladder with my hands on the rails and felt the cold from above leak down my sleeves like a draft with fingers. Dad tried to push it. "I saw," she said. "Like it mattered." "It does," she said, and then she turned, and the look on her face was the one she saves for news you can't take back. "Keys," she said. "Hospital." I nodded and went down because that's the kind of son I am. I do the thing and ask my questions where the air can't eavesdrop. The car started on the 3rd try. The windshield held onto its frost like it enjoyed being opaque. While the defroster thought about warming up, I pulled my phone to text Dad the most useless message in the world. "On my way." My hands delayed on the screen long enough to become mirrors for the window glass. Behind my reflection, across the street under the sodium light that turns faces dishonest, a man stood in a winter parka with the hood up. He wasn't doing anything. That's the point. People who aren't doing anything are always doing something. He was the kind of tall that knows it. His hands were in his pockets because he had no reason to show them. He tilted his face to the attic window like he had been told to check the weather up there. The light from the street made a runway of the snow at his feet. Across the runway he shaped a word with his mouth. I'm not a lip reader, and some words only have one shape. Ripe. I looked at the house like the house could look back. The attic light hummed. The ladder cord swayed. Mom was inside, gathering a purse and a charger, and the paperwork you never think to bring until you've had to watch a nurse rewrite your name from your insurance card. I opened the car door so fast the dome light scolded me. The parka man smiled small and started jogging. He didn't run like a mugger, and he didn't run like a neighbor coming to help. He ran like a delivery, like he had a schedule and my door was a stop. He cut across the salted patch and up onto the porch with a single heavy step that made the storm glass wobble in its frame. "Mom!" I shouted. The word hit the inside of the windshield and came back wet. The doorbell didn't ring. The door didn't knock. The knob turned once and met the lock and turned again with the kind of care that comes from practice. You know the sound a key makes when it finds a lock it learned in a different house but still wants to try. It sounds a lot like that. I was already out of the car, boots sliding on the tongue of slush between curb and walk. "Hey," I said, and heard how it did nothing. The man didn't look at me. He didn't have to. He was already shifting his shoulder to the jamb, already measuring the wood with the part of his body that understood leverage. The porch light made his breath look like signals. "Mom!" I yelled again, and for the first time in years I said it like a little kid says it, like her name could stop a world that decided to keep turning. The man in the parka bent his knees and leaned into our door, comfortable as a man slipping into a job he'd done 100 times before. The parka man's shoulder thudded into our front door and the old jamb answered with a tired wooden groan, the kind that tells you how long a house has been practicing not to give way. "Mom!" I shouted again, already halfway up the steps, boots skidding on the wet runner. The chain slid into its keep with a bright, defiant clink. I heard her flip the deadbolt, then her voice close to the wood. "Police are on their way," she said, "even if they weren't." The man didn't swear, didn't rage. He breathed. Quiet, measured exhales that fogged the storm glass. You can tell a lot about someone from how they breathe when the thing they want stays shut. He backed off a foot, then pressed his palm to the door like he was feeling for warmth in a wall. I could picture his face under the hood, those smooth, small smiles of men who never feel like they're trespassing. Then he stepped off the porch as if remembering something he'd left in the car and drifted back toward the street. We stood on either side of the door for a single, freighted second, me with my hand on the knob, Mom with hers on my arm, the house listening. "Hospital," she said, voice low. "Keys now. He's still out there. Then he knows we're home. We make it a crowd," she said, the way ER nurses talk. "Never say alone when you can say crowd." Her eyes lifted past my shoulder, past me, up the staircase, up through the ceiling, like she could see into the attic through memory. Something pinched across her brow and vanished. "2 minutes," she said. "I'll grab Dad's binder and we go." She headed toward the office. I should have gone toward the garage and the keys and the warm car. Instead, I turned toward the hallway like a magnet trying to remember which end it is. The attic cord swayed in a draft that shouldn't have existed. I touched it. It steadied. When I looked down, my fingers were dusted gray like I'd been rubbing a blackboard. Dad had tried to push the top box off the column. Not to catch it. He'd tried to send it. I remembered the look in his eyes, panic not for his chest, but for cardboard. I remembered the Sharpie letters bled into the corrugation, the way they only resolved if you really wanted them, like those old magic eye posters where you have to go soft on the seeing so the real picture can climb out. I told myself I just wanted to shove the top box far from the edge so Mom wouldn't trip when she came up to lock the hatch. That if I looked in it, it would be an accident. That accidents were honest. The ladder hinges cried a familiar complaint as I climbed. On my third rung, The attic wind salted my lips with old dust. On the floorboards, Dad's heel print had smudged into a half-moon, a dark scuff with grit ground into the grain. The stacked column loomed taller when I was alone with it. Boxes under the top one had settled crooked, and the whole tower leaned toward the darker beam like the house wanted to eat it. I put my hands on either side of the top box. The tape job was stubborn and chaotic, foam filament strip over paper tape over something that used to be tape a decade ago and now was a brittle crust. My palms went prickly from the cold cardboard, that attic cold that eats through skin and leaves the middle of your hand feeling hollow. "Don't," Dad's voice repeated, an echo with the man gone. "Cal," Mom called from below, "keys." "Coming," I said, and it sounded like a lie in a polite suit. I slid the box sideways a hand width so it sat square and safe. The lid puffed where the layers of tape overlapped. Old glue lets air in, air cracks glue more. I pressed the loose spot to settle it, and the seam made a soft, sticky gasp like a mouth deciding. The top layer of tape lifted by itself, 1 slow centimeter. A dry sound, almost like paper tearing, but less dramatic, like fibers unhooking their little arms. I could have stopped. I didn't. I eased 2 fingers under the loosened strip, and that's when the box fought back. Not with weight would have been normal, with texture. The tape edge and the cardboard lip felt barbed, not rough, not sandpapery, alive. A dozen fine, stubborn bristles snagged the meat of my fingertips and bent, then needled in. I hissed and jerked back, but the motion only slid the lid further. The tape peeled with a long whisper. My fingers felt like I had run them across steel wool laced with nettle. I threw the lid up in a flare of anger I immediately regretted. Inside was paper. Paper of a kind I didn't know. Sheets and scraps and folded blocks like pamphlets whose folds never flattened. Every piece had taken on a throw-take orange, like mildew taught to glow. Fibers stood up from the surface, a nap like harsh felt, so that when I hovered my hand, the air itself seemed to prickle. A smell lifted, not just attic damp and dust, something acid and sweet like pennies and old oranges and a burnt match. On top lay a Polaroid, white border gone ivory with time, corners softened by thumb oil. The image was too bright in some places, the way old Polaroids are when the camera has to choose between sky and face and decides for sky. An outdoor christening, bodies arranged in a loose horseshoe, spring grass pressed down by church shoes. People in denim and cotton, small town Sunday best. A long wooden structure behind them like a farmer's soccer goal. The sky was a hard Wisconsin blue with a milky smear of cloud, and in that smear, a faint, friendly half-moon hung where it had no business in daylight. At the center, a young couple held a swaddled blue bundle. Their hair was the Wisconsin blonde you get from July plus a November box kit. Their smiles were the tired, proud kind you wish on strangers with new babies, the good, generous smiles that don't demand. But their eyes were wrong. Not evil wrong, empty wrong, like someone had dimmed the room behind them. The towel at the baby's chest had been pulled down for the photo and then pushed back up. You could tell by the careless fold. On the baby's sternum, soft center, no bones yet, there was a mark. Not ink, not bruising. A pale, raised crescent, thin as a fingernail paring, set sideways like a smile under where the heart would harden someday. I didn't breathe for a second because the instinct is to be polite when you're looking at a naked newborn. Then I felt a pulse in my own chest, not a beat, a knock once, like something inside tapping back to say name me and I won't answer. Along the bottom edge of the group, not in the center, Off to the left, the way people who don't want to be included still get included, two figures stood a step back. A man with a carpenter's forearms and a woman whose mouth had the shape it holds when she's trying not to cry. Younger, leaner, full of the stunned energy of people learning new verbs. Pack, leave, hide. My parents. Mine. I didn't realize I'd said it out loud until my breath fogged the photo and the image blurred, and I wiped it with my sleeve like that wouldn't smear a decade of dust into the emulsion. My fingers stung worse as the sleeve dragged across the bristle paper stack. The sensation wasn't like a paper cut. Paper cuts are clean, mean, and over. This was a little army of points pressing, probing, as if each fiber had curiosity. I pulled my hand away and saw tiny white pips rising along the pads of my fingers, like hives made of static. Under the Polaroid on top of the stack of bristle sheets, a blue painter's tape strip had been stuck down to hold something in place. Mom's tape. Mom doesn't trust duct tape unless it's on ducts. Her handwriting ran across the tape in a slanted grocery list script I could have picked out of a lineup of 1,000 moms. Cal, if you're seeing this, it's because I failed to keep you safe another way. Please, read. Don't touch. I swallowed, carefully. Using the edges of my middle fingernails like tweezers, I lifted the tape and the thing it fixed. A white index card gone tea-brown at the corners. 3 lines, all caps, quick and urgent, letters quivering where the pen had pressed too hard. 1. Don't touch the papers. 2. Don't say the christening name. 3. If someone says blessed page, do not answer. The hum of the attic light got louder without changing volume. A mosquito in a jar sound. Mom's rules always sound like they've been tested a second before you heard them. I'd already broken the first. My fingertips throbbed. The skin felt tight, as if a sunburn were thinking about becoming a scab. I put my hand to my mouth and immediately remembered Blue Hoodie in the alley in Chicago and then corrected myself. That was not yet, that hadn't happened. The mind gets ahead of the body when fear is a projector. Cal, Mom from the landing now. Keys, we have to go. Sweetheart. Got them, I lied again, because that's the kind of son I am when a box is breathing at me. I looked below the index card because that's the kind of idiot I am. The top sheets were dense with handwriting in a script that wasn't English and wasn't not English. The letters looked like English letters that had been taught a different moral code. S's took on the weight of snakes. R's grew extra legs. Lines that should have been made by one pen point looked like 5 had been taped together and dragged. Between the lines, faint, shadowy shapes lurked. Not sigils exactly, more like smudges that decided to be symbols when you stared. In the corner of the top page, a stamped date bled, 02-10-05, my birthday. Above it, 3 words repeated 3 times, children chanting jump rope, blessed be slash blessed be slash blessed be. Something moved in the paper, not like an image animating, like depth. Like I'd been staring down a well and had convinced myself it was a photo of a well until a current ran across the water at the bottom. The hair on my arm stood. My left hand traitor drifted lower toward the corner of the second sheet where the fibers lifted more boldly like a field of wheat in March wind. The closer my fingertips got, the more the sound in my head adjusted, not the attic hum. Voices. Very quiet, very far, as if walls were a courtesy to them. A child laughing in a gym. A gas station door chime. The clack of a register key from a place that still uses them. Blessed page, a woman whispered, in the exact shape of Mom's voice but half a key off, like a piano that had lived next to a heater. The words didn't come through the air. They were remembered in my head as if I'd heard them already. I snatched my hand back so hard I rattled the lid. The attic seemed to breathe out. My pulse banged in my wrist, and the box and the beam and the light all balanced in one exact second, where any tiny nudge would topple everything that wasn't me. I slid the Polaroid into my hoodie pouch without thinking. It felt cold against my stomach even through cotton. Then I took the index card and set it on top of the stack again where Mom had taped it. It felt wrong to take even that small thing. The rules were heavier in my hand than the photo had been. As I set the card down, I couldn't help reading line 2 again. Don't say the christening name. There was no name on the index card, no name on the top page, but there was a small folded slip tucked into the corner of the box, the top edge just visible under the rucked bristle paper, a triangle curl like a moth wing. The slip had the thinness of prayer paper you leave in a wall. I told myself I wouldn't. Then I moved the top sheet with 2 fingernails like tweezers again and eased the slip out. The fibers snapped at my skin, a dozen needle kisses. My eyes watered. The slip was brittle but strong, a paradox, like old spider silk. On it, in ink that had drowned and dried and drowned again, a single name had been written in a hand I didn't know. The second letter had bled into the third. The whole thing fuzzed at the edges like a secret trying to stay one. I didn't say it. I didn't even complete it in my head, because that's still saying in a way that words understand. I folded the slip back along its old crease and tucked it where it had been. Then I laid the index card on top like a lid, and put the box's real lid down like a second lid. The tape wouldn't stick, so I crossed the top with the blue painter's tape that had been holding the card. It felt like putting a Band-Aid on a haunted house. On the side of the box, in the Sharpie bleed I'd noticed earlier, the unreadable letters finally decided to say themselves. The holes in the cardboard where someone had worked too hard with the marker gave the strokes a stutter. Blessed page. The phrase that had ridden Mom's warning like a parasite. The phrase that sat in Rule 3 like a mousetrap. The attic window ticked. Houses do that when they warm, when they cool, when they remember anything. I glanced over my shoulder and saw the street through the dusty pane. Sodium light pours everything into one flavor. Across the road, under the moth-specked street lamp, the parka man had taken his old position like he owned it. He wasn't at our door anymore. He stood where I'd first seen him, exactly where he'd made himself look harmless. He tilted his head to find the angle to the attic window. I could see the triangle of his nose and the thin bow of his mouth, and the way the hood framed his face like a tunnel your eyes can't climb out of. I felt stupid for being up here and not down there, and stupider for not knowing which place was worse. He shaped a word with his lips. I don't know why some mouths are easier to read than others. Maybe practice. Maybe certain syllables are more eager to be seen. The shape was the same as before. Ripe. I wanted to yell to Mom, to tell her not to come up, to tell her to stay away from the door, to say hospital now, keys now, crowd now. I wanted to call the police, the neighbor with the snowblower, the man across the street with 2 flags on his porch, anybody with elbows. But the word reached me without sound, and my chest answered it without permission. Not pain. Reply. My sternum went cold and then warm and then cold again, like someone had set a coin there and removed it and set it again. The coin had a curve to it. The parka man took 2 slow backward steps, then pivoted like a runner finding his lane. He lowered his head just enough that the hood hid his eyes. Every part of him said he'd done this before, that gravity was his friend. He sprinted for our door. I didn't remember deciding to run. One moment I was on the attic ladder, heart drumming like a woodpecker in a culvert. The next I was on a greyhound with the window glass shuttering at 70, Green Bay sliding off my life like a coat I wasn't allowed to keep. The bus smelled like burnt coffee and damp coats. The heater vents hissed old tobacco ghosts. I sat halfway back, behind a girl watching TikTok on volume 1 and ahead of a man whose beard hid sunflower seeds he didn't share. Mom's rules still lived in my pocket on the index card, each line heavier now that I'd broken one. I tried not to think about Dad in a cardiac wing, or Mom answering police questions she wouldn't answer truthfully. My fingers still burned from the bristle paper touch, little white pips like Braille spelling out mistakes. Chicago's Greyhound Terminal at 2 a.m. is the kind of place you don't tell your grandparents about. Tile floors that shine with mop water but never look clean. Flyers taped to vending machines. Lawyers for deportation cases. Jobs no questions asked. People sleeping with bags clutched like organs. I bought an hour of Wi-Fi with crumpled bills and sat at a plastic table sticky with forgotten soda. My laptop fan purred like it feared being heard. Read it first. I typed feeling watched cult half-moon mark papers blessed be. Nothing clean. Paranormal subs dismissed half of it. The other half leaned in with same bro ghost stories. I made a throwaway account, Crownless Midwest, post title, Family Attic Papers That Cut Skin, Polaroid W/baby plus crescent scar, anyone know cult stuff? I didn't expect answers, but the replies came quick. Search Hollow Crown plus 9 branches. Rust Belt Folk Network not online, don't say their phrases. If your chest feels like it's knocking, stop posting. That last one got buried, but I saw it before it was downvoted to 0. I switched to Discord. Someone had already DM'd Argent 11. Profile pic, silver coin on a black background. Saw your post. Don't stay on public threads. Crown is older than broadband. They read through piggyback protocols. Think 1990s BBS that never unplugged. I typed 9 branches. Rust Belt born, expanded. They nest where America's tired coal grain mills. Midwest, Appalachia, Delta, Basin, High Plains, Wasatch, Inland Empire, Pine Coast, Boroughs. They call those the branches. You're on one. Why me? I wrote, fingers slick. Every vessel asks that. Answer, because they branded you at birth. You've been ripening. That box wasn't storage, it was signal. Touch equals link. Now they see you, you'll see them. My pulse climbed. What do I do? Argent 11 sent a live location pin. Just outside Chicago, near an industrial block where the city runs out of patience. Blue hoodie. He knows them. Follow but don't touch. He's bait. Use him before they use you. I shut the laptop, jammed it into my bag, and told myself I wasn't dumb enough to follow coordinates from a stranger on Discord. Then I looked around the terminal. 3 people were watching me, not openly, just enough that I felt it on my skin. I walked out into the lake wind, collar high, shoes slapping wet concrete. Freight trains moaned somewhere in the dark. Sodium lamps painted the warehouses the same color as bad cheese. That's when the hand landed on my shoulder. Firm, urgent, not violent yet. A low voice at my ear, breath hot with burnt coffee. Quiet, they piggyback devices. I spun and saw him. Early 20s, blue hoodie zipped to the throat, eyes flicking like he'd borrowed them from a hunted animal. And in his other hand, an old Nokia flip phone, screen glowing with someone else's name. The man in the blue hoodie didn't look like bait. He looked like every kid you'd ignore at a bus station. Slouched, shadow-wide shoulders built from too many late nights on folding chairs. But his grip on my wrist was iron. Quiet, he hissed again, dragging me down a narrow service alley that stank of fryer oil and wet cardboard. The sodium light above flickered once, then surrendered, leaving us in a sick gray half-glow from the distant interstate signs. I stumbled after him, sneakers slipping on frozen runoff. "What are you?" I started. "Shut up," he cut me off. "Phones, cameras, even the ticket kiosk, they piggyback anything with a signal, eyes everywhere." He kept looking back over his shoulder like the brick walls themselves were listening. His grip hadn't softened. My fingers tingled under his hand, a low static that made me want to peel my own skin. I yanked. "Let go. Not safe here." His words came clipped, like every syllable cost. "You lit the beacon when you touched those papers. Now that's when it happened." The static under my skin surged. It was as if every blood vessel in my wrist decided to scream. The heat climbed fast, too fast. My palm slicked with sweat, my arm twitched to escape. "Stop," I gasped. Something, but the hoodie guy's face had already changed. His mouth opened in a soundless gasp. His grip spasmed and tightened. Steam lifted off our joined hands. His skin fissured along the knuckles first, thin red cracks that hissed. Then the cracks spread up his forearm, jagged, glowing like fault lines. His eyes went wide and bloodshot, steam venting through the whites. I tried to wrench free, but the harder I pulled, the deeper his fingers clawed into me, desperate like a drowning man clutching the only raft. "Let go," I shouted. The hiss turned into a wet, bubbling roar. His hoodie darkened at the chest, not from sweat but from blood forcing itself through pores, boiling before it hit the air. Red spray hit the alley wall in sizzling flecks. He screamed then. It wasn't human. It was kettle and pipe burst and scalded lung all at once. The sound rattled between the bricks, too big for the space. And then he collapsed, still gripping me until the last second, until his flesh sloughed against my skin and his fingers split. He hit the ground steaming, body twitching, then still. I stood above him, panting, hands still raised like I could shake off what had just happened. The air reeked of copper and something acrid, like burnt pennies and spoiled meat. Steam curled from his mouth, from the cracks across his body. I stared at my own wrist. No wounds, no burns, just faint red pips where his skin had pressed mine. My pulse hammered in them like a drum under ice. What the hell? It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't defense. It felt older, like a reflex my body had been hiding. Touch wasn't just touch anymore. A noise echoed down the alley, soft, collective. I froze. At the far end, shadows detached themselves from the deeper dark. Figures 3, maybe 4, heads tilted, bodies still. At the opposite end, more silhouettes stepped into view. Their breath clouded in unison like a choir exhaling. The word reached me not by ears but through bone, crawling up from marrow. "Blessed page." Dozens of whispers, all layered, all wrong. I staggered back, foot sliding in the steam slick, my heel almost catching on the boiled ruin at my feet. The bristle paper in the attic had warned me. Mom's handwriting had begged me. Rule 3, if someone says blessed page, do not answer. And every instinct in me wanted to answer because the word vibrated inside my chest, syncing with that crescent knock under my ribs. I clamped my mouth shut so hard my teeth rattled. The silhouettes whispered again, louder, "Blessed page." The alley had no exit now, just me, the boiled corpse, and the dark shapes closing in. Chicago had spat me out half-broken. By the time I bought another ticket north, the Greyhound driver was side-eyeing me like I'd rolled in from a chemical fire. My hoodie stank of copper and steam, and my eyes carried too much road. I told myself I was going home to check on Dad, that Mom would need me at the hospital, that my absence would brand me guilty. But that wasn't why I got off in Green Bay and rented a car with a forged smile. I was going back because of her. Mrs. Brand, my substitute religious education teacher from ninth grade, the one who had whispered ripen, the one who had tried to stuff me into the back seat of her Kia like luggage, the one Dad had never forgiven the courts for only giving time served plus probation, until she broke the rules again. Now she was locked in a minimum security women's facility on the far edge of Brown County. And if anyone could explain why men in parkas whispered blessed page and why strangers boiled alive just by touching me, it would be her. Style prison looked nothing like the TV version. No guard towers, no razor wire glinting in floodlight. It looked like an old high school someone had bricked up and posted signs around, building hope, changing lives. At the front desk, the CO eyed my ID longer than was polite, then longer still. He had the kind of belly that comes from lifting once and remembering the glory days. "Who you here for?" "Rebecca Brand," I said, and the sound of her name in my mouth felt like chewing foil. His jaw flexed. He didn't type it in, he already knew. "Your family, former student." He sucked on his teeth, then leaned closer. His breath was coffee and mint layered like camouflage. "Kid, listen to me." He dropped his voice until it was almost shame. "When you're in there, don't look at her. Do your business with the floor or the wall or your hands, not her face, not her eyes, understand?" I tried to laugh. "She's behind glass, right? Visitor's room." The guard's face said no. "We bend the rules for her. It's better for everyone when she stays in her cell." I didn't ask what better meant. He looked like a man who'd been asked too many times. The corridors hummed like every fluorescent had a throat infection. The smell was pine saw layered over iron. Her door was already unlocked. The guard stepped back, jangling his keys like a nervous tick. "I'll be right here," he said, "but don't call me in. Don't make me go in there with you." I swallowed. "Thanks." "Don't thank me," he muttered, eyes on the floor. The cell was a box, concrete, one narrow bed bolted to the wall, one steel sink. She sat on the bottom bunk with her hands folded on her lap. Mrs. Brand had aged. Gray streaks spidered through her hair. Crow's feet cut trenches beside her eyes, but none of it weakened her. If anything, it gave her face a deeper gravity, like old statues you feel guilty for looking at too long. When she saw me, her lips parted in something too eager to be maternal. "Adam," she whispered, "you came back." My lungs cinched. "Don't call me that. You don't get to choose your name." Her voice was warm, coaxing. "Names are doors, and yours was carved open long before you could speak it." I forced myself to stand straighter. "Why are they following me? What's the hollow crown?" Her smile quivered at the edges, like the words gave her joy she was trying to keep contained. "You felt it, haven't you? The heat, the way flesh recoils, the way their voices find you through brick and wire. You've started to hear the page." I shook my head, backing a step. "No." Her shoulders tilted. "Then why come here?" The silence between us grew too big. My fingers twitched. The Polaroid in my hoodie pouch felt heavier. "Where are my parents?" I demanded. Her eyes softened in mock pity. "The defectors, they ran from the branches from you. They thought they could keep the crown asleep forever, but they couldn't. You touched the papers, you heard the rules, it's awake now." "Stop, you are awake now." I turned toward the door, throat tight. The guard wasn't coming in, he'd made that clear. I was alone with her. "I shouldn't be here," I said. "Of course you should," she said gently. "Every vessel comes home eventually." Then her mouth changed. Not a smile, not a scream, just opening, wider than any jaw should, wider than any face should allow. Her lips stretched in silence, teeth vanishing, tongue receding, until the black inside filled more space than her body did. The air pressure shifted, pulling at my hair, tugging breath out of me. I stumbled back, hands up, but there was nowhere to go. The black of her mouth kept widening, spilling past her chin, up her forehead, past the ceiling. It wasn't a mouth anymore. It was a tunnel. The walls of the cell bent toward it. The fluorescent bulb fizzed out, swallowed. I felt my shoes leave the floor. I screamed, but the sound stretched thin, pulled into the black until I couldn't hear it anymore. And then there was nothing under me at all. Blinding white hit my eyes. Grass scratched my palms. I blinked against the sun, too yellow, too high. A field stretched around me, open, endless like the Polaroid. My stomach lurched. I knew this place. The field where snow never stuck. The place where my parents, my real parents, had once stood, smiling with that bundle. My ribs knocked once hard, as if something inside recognized home before I did. I hit the ground hard enough to rattle my teeth. Not concrete, not prison tile, grass, cold and wet but alive. The blades clawed my palms when I pushed myself upright. The sky was the first thing wrong, too clear, too yellow, as if the sun had been scrubbed of its softer colors. A wind moved through the field, dry and constant, and yet not a flake of snow lay anywhere, though I knew in my bones this was Wisconsin in winter. Snow should have been here, drifting against fence posts, crusting in the shade of barns. But here the grass held stubborn, like snow refused it. I turned, and the shuttered dairy co-op stood behind me. Its roof sagged. The sign above the doors had peeled until only the ghost letters remained, County V Creamery. A rusted county road sign leaned at the turnoff, County V. The air smelled like silage long gone sour. And then I saw the beam. A crude wooden structure rose from the middle of the field. It looked like a football goalpost hammered together by men who hated straight lines. A horizontal beam lashed to two uprights with rope gone stiff from weather. My throat closed. Two bodies hung upside down from that beam, wrists lashed to ankles, heads swaying in the wind. Mom, Dad, my parents, the ones who raised me. Mom's hair hung in gray ropes. Dad's shirt clung tight with sweat. Their faces were red with blood pooling downward, but they were alive. I saw Mom's lips move, frantic even before her voice found me. "Run, Cal, run." Her scream cracked the air like a gunshot. The response came not from her captors, but from the crowd. They'd been there all along, blending into the fence rows, into the low slope of the field, into the broken machinery parked under tarp. 30, 40, hard to count. Their clothes were ordinary denim jackets, flannel, knit hats, but their stillness was unnatural. When they spoke together. Blessed Page. The words rolled over the grass, low and reverent. A prayer, a warning, a hunger. I clutched my hoodie pouch. The Polaroid inside burned cold against my stomach. Two figures stepped forward from the crowd. They carried themselves like royalty at a county fair. A man and a woman, white blonde hair catching the cruel sun. Their faces were kind, almost too kind, the kind you'd trust to watch your baby or sell you life insurance. Their smiles were steady. Their eyes were dead. The woman's hand rose in a gentle wave. "Adam," she said, and my skin iced over. "No," I whispered, "not that name." The man's voice was deeper, paternal in its rhythm. "We've searched 20 years for you, our boy." My stomach lurched. My birth parents, the couple from the Polaroid. Behind me, Mom screamed again, voice ragged. "Don't listen to them, Cal." The blond man's smile never wavered. He stepped closer, the crowd parting for him as if on instinct. They can't keep you anymore. You're ours. You've always been ours. The crowd's murmur grew. A chant threaded into the wind. Blessed page, blessed page, blessed page. Each repetition vibrated in my ribs, syncing with that crescent knock beneath my sternum. My breath stuttered. I wanted to answer them, to fall into rhythm. But I looked up at Mom and Dad, their faces purpled from blood rushing down. Their eyes were not dead. They were desperate, alive, mine. I found my voice. They are my parents. The blond man tilted his head, pity in the angle. They are defectors, borrowers, they were never yours. The blonde woman added softly, they stole you from us, they feared what you were meant to be. The blond man drew something from his belt, a blade long and thin, glinting sharp even in the washed-out sun. He stepped under the beam. My father, my real father, struggled, twisting against the rope, voice hoarse. Go to hell, Dad spat. The crowd hushed as if savoring the moment. The knife flashed upward in a swift, almost tender motion, and I watched in frozen horror as my birth father sliced my adoptive dad's throat open to the wind. Blood spilled in a curtain, red bright against the winter grass. Mom's scream became a keening wail. The crowd whispered louder, voices cracking with hunger. Blessed page. The field went silent after the blade cut Dad's throat. Not even the wind dared to move. The only sound was the wet patter of blood dripping into winter grass that refused snow. Mom's cries tore at the beam, hoarse, desperate. My chest knotted, not from grief alone, but from something older, something waiting. The cult's chant trembled at the edges of the stillness. Blessed page, blessed page, blessed page. Every voice aimed inward at me. The words pressed against my skull like damp cloth. I staggered forward, fists clenched. The Polaroid in my hoodie pouch burned colder with every step. My birth mother's smile widened, tender and wrong. My birth father wiped the knife clean on his sleeve, his eyes on me as if this were rehearsal, not crime. The chant swelled until it felt like air couldn't breathe without it. My ears rang. My knees shook. I couldn't think above the sound. And then I remembered what the guard at the prison had said, the warning in Mom's rules, the bristle paper fibers that had stung my skin. Touch lets them in, but what if I stopped fighting it? The thought rose like bile. What if I let them? I closed my eyes. The field dissolved into dark, and suddenly I wasn't alone in my head. Hundreds of minds pressed against mine, greasy and frantic like fingertips on wet glass. I felt their hunger, their joy, their certainty that I was the vessel, the hollow crown. They touched me, and I touched back. The connection wasn't skin, wasn't nerve, it was marrow. A direct line between the thing knocking inside my ribs and the cult's outstretched souls. The first scream came sharp, then another, then a chorus. I opened my eyes. The field was fire without flame. Bodies shuddered as cracks split across their skin, glowing red like pottery in a kiln. Steam hissed from mouths that tried to chant but only whined. Their flesh fissured. Blood boiled and spattered the grass. The air filled with the scent of iron and char. One by one they shattered. Not collapsed, not bled out, shattered. Their bodies cracked like glass under thermal shock, exploding into fragments that dissolved into black ash before they hit the earth. The chant ended in choking silence. Only two remained, swaying on their feet, their pale hair catching the sun, my birth parents. They didn't scream, they didn't fight, they only smiled. Ripe, my birth mother croaked, fissures crawling across her cheeks. Ripe, echoed my birth father, red spilling through his smile. They crumbled, faces frozen in joy, and the ash of their bodies joined the storm already whipping through the field. Wind lifted, slicking gray dust across my face. It stuck to my skin, my lips, my eyelids. I gagged, spitting grit. Then beneath my shirt something stirred, not breath, not heartbeat. A knock. Once, hard, from inside my rib cage, from the crescent-shaped thing that wasn't mine but lived there all the same. I staggered, hand pressed flat against my sternum. It knocked again. The ash of my birth parents still clung to my jacket when I checked into the first motel. I didn't bother with a fake name. Caleb Morin was just another Midwestern nobody, and nobody raises an eyebrow when nobodies pay cash. The neon vacancy sign buzzed all night like it had opinions about me. In the mirror, my face looked a year older than it had in the attic. My eyes ringed in gray, my lips cracked from ash grit. I showered twice, but still smelled copper in my hair. Dinner was a cup of Dollar General ramen cooked on a microwave older than I was. I slurped it in silence, every creak of pipes sounding like footsteps in the hall. The days blurred. Miles unspooled under borrowed cars and bus tickets. Every town looked the same once you were watching for it. At a VFW hall, old men in caps sipped light beer while one woman asked if I'd found my page yet. Her eyes didn't blink often enough. At a gas station in southern Illinois, the HVAC repair guy held the door for me, tool bag clinking. As I passed, he whispered, "Blessed," and I ran before he finished. In a church parking lot in Indiana, I saw a revival staged from the back of a van. Families clapped to acoustic guitars while a preacher in a polo shirt promised renewal. I caught the sticker on his lectern, a white crescent moon and 3 letters, HOPE. No one else seemed to notice. Everywhere I stopped, diners, laundromats, motel lobbies, someone was watching too close. They wore kindness like camouflage. They lived inside the cracks of ordinary life. On a night without sleep, I pulled into a library parking lot and stole Wi-Fi through the walls. Argent 11 hadn't DM'd since Chicago, but his last post still haunted me. 9 branches, you're on one. I pieced the map together from scraps, blogs, whispered forums. Midwest, where it started. Rust towns, dairy co-ops, abandoned silos. Appalachia, coal hollows and revival tents. Delta, swamps, levees, backwater churches. Basin, desert shrines, truck stops, long roads. High plains, grain elevators, storm shelters, prairie towns. Wasatch, mountain wards, Mormon offshoots, cabins with altars. Inland Empire, warehouses, loading docks, citrus groves. Pine Coast, Maine forest, salt box houses, shrines in lobster shacks. Boroughs, New York basements, subway tunnels, storefront churches. 9 branches, 9 roots, 9 nets cast over America. No matter where I drove, I was in someone's net. A tip came in through Discord. Harvest group meets in the suburbs Wednesday nights, child care provided. The house looked like every other on the cul-de-sac. Vinyl siding, trimmed lawn, minivan out front. A banner in the living room, family, faith, future. I slipped inside during the prayer. The adults sat in a circle, hands linked, eyes shut. Their mouths moved in silence. I crept down the hallway toward the sound of a lullaby. It was faint, played on a loop from a cheap Bluetooth speaker. The door to the nursery stood ajar. Inside, rows of tiny cribs, empty. On the shelves, stacks of baby bibs, all white, each embroidered with the same symbol, a crescent moon pressed against a tiny red crown. I picked one up. The fabric smelled new, untouched. Behind me, the lullaby stopped. The nursery was empty, but my head wasn't. I stole one of the bibs, stuffed it into my hoodie pocket, and drove until the cul-de-sac lights blurred into highway dark. At a chain motel off I-80, I locked myself in the bathroom and spread the bib across the sink like evidence. The embroidery was too neat, crescent against crown, stitches precise as if machine-made. But the thread was rough, almost metallic, catching the light like wire. I dug my laptop out, opened the Discord again. The Harvest Group's website had a welcome packet hidden under a parent login. Catechism pages scanned crooked cartoon fonts to make them look friendly. But I read every line. The catechism was clear if you knew where to squint. Ripening wasn't about age. It wasn't about destiny alone. It was about choice. The vessel shall be asked to favor unity over self. In mercy he shall widen the breach. That's what all of it had been. Every panic they'd driven me into, the parka man sprinting for the door, the nursery with empty cribs, blue hoodie clawing for my arm, was design. They corner me, scare me, leave me no way out except to touch, to connect, to kill in a way that felt like mercy. And every time I gave in, every time I let myself be their executioner, the breach widened. It wasn't my power alone. It was their liturgy, their trap. They wanted me to keep doing it. They needed me to. I sat there until the laptop screen dimmed. The bib looked like it was smirking at me in the sink. I whispered just to hear it. I didn't choose this. But the catechism's lines stuck word for word like they'd been waiting in my head all along. The vessel shall be asked, not forced, asked, and so far I'd answered. That's when I heard it, a crackle, soft and tinny from the nightstand. The motel hadn't had a baby monitor when I checked in, but there it was now, little white plastic antenna bent, its green light pulsed faintly. "Cal." The voice froze me, Mom, weak, trembling but alive. I grabbed the monitor, pressed it to my ear. "Mom, where are you?" Static, then again clearer. "Please, Cal, come home." Relief punched through me so hard I almost cried. But then the same voice, same breath, same timbre, same pause between words, but colder. "Please come home." Exactly the same. Like a recording played back by someone who had never heard a human voice before. The light on the monitor flicked red. The motel's carpet still held the stink of ash and ramen when I heard the knock. Not the cult's knock. This one had rhythm, human rhythm. 3 taps, pause, 2 more. I opened the door half an inch, chain still fastened. The man outside wore a navy ball cap, sweat stained and sun faded, the bill bent like it had been chewed. His back was straight in a way that said he'd been standing at attention long after retirement. Beside him stood a woman in a long denim coat, hair plaited with gray, eyes steady. She held a small paper bag, grease dark at the bottom. "We heard you stirred the crown," the man said. His voice was rough but not unkind. "And you're still alive, that makes you our problem." The woman added, "Or maybe our chance." I didn't answer, but I unlatched the chain. We sat around the little motel table, the paper bag between us. The chaplain spread packets of kosher salt across the laminate surface. The woman poured ash, fine gray like burned cedar, into the empty styrofoam coffee cups. "Page cult thinks it's new," the chaplain said, "but it's just old hunger wearing a new mask." The woman's voice was softer. "Where I come from, stories live in more than mouths. They cling to breathe, to bone. Salt pulls them apart. Ash seals the split." She reached into the bag and withdrew a tiny pouch sewn from deerskin. "We call it meeknesi, little heart. You carry it. You carry separation. You won't stop the crown, but you can buy silence." We worked past midnight. I poured a circle of kosher salt along the inside walls of the motel room. The chaplain muttered a psalm under his breath, the words stumbling but sincere. The woman placed ash at the corners, whispering in Menominee, the syllables curling like smoke. When the line was finished, I felt it immediately. Air pressed tighter, sound dampened, the motel fridge buzz dulled to nothing. The chaplain nodded. They can knock, they can whisper, but they can't cross. For the first time since the attic, my chest loosened. I almost believed I could sleep. At 3 a.m., I woke to a single chirp. The motel smoke alarm blinked its red eye at me. One chirp, then silence. I lay back down, heart steadying, batteries, just batteries. Then it chirped again, longer this time. And then it spoke. Not with static, not with distortion, with my own voice. Let me out. The church basement smelled like every church basement I'd ever known. Burnt coffee, carpet cleaner, the ghost of casseroles past. Folding tables held stacks of paperbacks, shrink-wrapped in bundles of 6. The cover design looked like it had been spat out of a 2012 marketing seminar. Pale blue gradient, a minimalist crown logo, and the title in tall, soft sans serif. The hollow crown, choosing scarcity in an age of abundance. I didn't belong there. My borrowed jacket itched. A woman in a turtleneck smiled at me as she poured weak lemonade into Dixie cups. I nodded, grabbed one of the shrink-wrapped stacks, and walked out the side door like I'd been asked to do it. No one stopped me. No one ever does when the cult wants you to take something. In the motel room, I tore the plastic open with my teeth. The smell of cheap ink filled the air, metallic and sharp. The prose was corporate casual, TED talk dressed in scripture. Scarcity is clarity. Abundance breeds weakness. Discipline is love wearing steel boots. Every chapter pushed the same idea: deny, withhold, reduce. It wasn't framed as religion but as mindset. A wellness brand for people who'd forgotten how to breathe without a manual. The margins were empty, too empty. I remembered the Menominee teacher's words: ash seals the split. So I rubbed ash. From the motel's half-burnt match in a styrofoam tray, I smeared black streaks across page 37. The white space changed. Sigils bled up through the gray smear, geometric spirals, half-moons tucked inside crowns, script too thin to be ink. They had always been there, waiting. The book was a palimpsest, a two-faced thing. Corporate bromides on the surface, cult gospel underneath. Every page I touched bloomed with them. Hidden catechisms threaded through mindset tips, turning banal self-help into something like scripture. Scarcity is clarity became emptiness invites the crown. Discipline is love became discipline is the scythe of ripening. I pressed harder, ash smudging into the paper. My thumb traced a crescent sigil in the corner of a page. And then, the motel air thickened. A chorus swelled inside my skull, hundreds of voices layered in a single instant. Men, women, children, laughing, whispering, praying, all at once, all inside. They didn't speak words, they didn't have to, they touched. My breath hitched. My chest knocked once, twice, like the crescent thing inside me had been waiting for the choir. I dropped the book, but the voices didn't stop. The highway bled me into the suburbs, where glass towers slouched half-empty, ringed by cracked parking lots and weeds tall enough to wave. A faded sign on the entry road promised, "Innovation Campus, your future starts here." The letters peeled like sunburn. The campus had died years back, another startup graveyard. But the crescent logo espresso machine in the lobby hummed like it had never stopped. I slipped through a side door pried open by rust. The air smelled of ozone and cold brew gone stale. The glass conference room glowed under pendant lights. 6 of them sat around the table, business casual soldiers. Patagonia vests, loafers, their laptops open to slides that meant nothing, bullet points about scarcity strategies, graphs that plummeted in ways they seemed to celebrate. Their hands were linked on the table. Their lips moved in perfect rhythm, whispering not to each other but through each other. Blessed page, blessed page, blessed page. I felt the words crawl under my ribs. I thought of Blue Hoodie screaming as he boiled. I thought of the field, the ash, the 100 voices pressing against me through paper. And for the first time, I didn't flinch. I stepped into the room. The glass door clicked behind me. 6 heads lifted in unison. I reached out, not with my hands first, but with whatever the knock inside my chest had become. A push, not a pull. The first man, vest zipped to his throat, seized. Cracks spidered across his cheekbones, red light glowing inside. His eyes steamed, and then he went to ash. The second tried to lunge, but I touched his wrist. Steam erupted from his mouth, and he collapsed in a hiss. One by one I chose, not panic, not accident, precision, like flipping switches, like culling. 5 gone. Ash drifted in the conference light. Only one remained, trembling against the glass wall. His laptop slid to the floor, PowerPoint frozen mid-slogan, "Abundance breeds weakness." I grabbed his collar. His skin shivered under my grip, fissures beginning to form. He croaked, voice thin as paper, "Please don't. Tell me something useful." My voice sounded alien in my ears, harder than I remembered. He swallowed, the skin of his throat glowing faintly red. "Your birth mother," he gasped. "She's alive." My stomach lurched. She shattered, I saw it. His lips cracked. Ash seeped out. Still he forced the words. "She's learned to keep her skin." His jaw split, and he collapsed in a hiss of boiling blood, leaving only a smear of gray across my shoes. Every road seemed to bend back toward home. I told myself I was running, but every Greyhound seat, every stale motel, every empty Harvest nursery was just orbit. The gravity was County V. When the County V Creamery sign came into view, sagging and rust-scabbed, I felt the knock in my ribs quicken, as if the thing inside me recognized the way before I did. Snow blurred across the windshield but never settled. The closer I got, the more the ground refused it. The field was the same stubborn green it had been in the Polaroid. The field where snow doesn't stick. I parked the borrowed truck at the fence line, engine ticking itself cool, and listened. The wind had voices in it, too many to count. The truck bed held a grading rig for municipal salt runs. Some county worker's bad luck had become my tool. I tore the bags open, the crystals biting my fingers, and fed them through the grate as I drove slow circles into the field. Grind, scatter, crunch. Again and again until I'd carved a spiral into the winter grass. From the air it must have looked like a snail shell carved in frost. On the ground it felt like a line between me and them. Each crunch of tire over salt felt like a prayer without words. In the cab I tore a motel notepad into strips. I wrote the rules the way Mom would have, plain, slanted, no flourishes. Don't unify. Don't grant mercy. Keep the story yours. I taped them to my chest, one over the sternum where the knock had started. The tape pulled my skin when I breathed, a crude bandage against something far older. Dusk bled quick, shadows stretching thin across the co-op's broken roof. The spiral glittered faint in the low light. I stood at its center, ash pouch in one pocket, Polaroid in the other. My adoptive mother's scream lived in my memory, jagged and alive. "Not theirs," I whispered, pressing the paper rules flat against my shirt. "Mine." The wind stilled, even the grass hushed. The clouds above thinned, not broken, peeled like skin lifted from fruit. A slice of white curved into view, not in the sky, in me. The skin under my taped rules bulged outward, ribs straining. A crescent shape pressed up beneath shirt, beneath flesh glowing faint like bone made of light. I clutched my chest, staggered. The knock became a hammer, and the field whispered, 100 voices layered into one. Ripe. The salt spiral shimmered under the last of twilight, every crystal sharp as glass. I stood at its center, Polaroid in one hand, ash pouch in the other, chest throbbing with the crescent knock. The wind shifted. The grass bent outward as if making space. 9 figures walked the field. Not the nameless crowd this time, representatives. Each branch had sent a mouthpiece. The first was a deacon in coal dust coveralls, skin blackened as though he'd been carved from the seam itself. His breath smoked even without cold. The second, a stepmom type in pastel cardigan, Bible tabs bristling like knives from her book. She smiled too wide, eyes glassy as ice on asphalt. The third, a man in a Patagonia vest, clean shave, conference badge still swinging from his neck. His voice carried before he spoke, oily and certain. "We'll circle back." Behind them came 6 more, each dressed from a different branch, each ordinary in the way you never notice until it's too late. They stopped at the edge of the spiral. Salt hissed where their shoes brushed it. The cold deacon spoke first. "One touch, that's all the crown requires." The stepmom nodded. "Blessed page, Cal, just one." The HR man smirked. "Your synergy with us will scale." My pulse banged so hard against the paper rules taped to my chest I thought the ink might bleed. "I've touched enough," I said. My throat was raw, and every time I did, someone burned. They tilted their heads, 9 sets of dead eyes catching the faint glow from my ribs. "That's the point," the deacon rasped. I almost stepped back, almost gave them what they wanted. But then I remembered blue hoodie boiling, the conference room ash, the catechism's line, "Mercy widens the breach." So instead I shut my eyes. I didn't reach out with touch. I pulled back and listened. Their whispers came like wires under my skin, 9 minds braided tight. They expected the vessel to press, to burn, to kill. Instead, I only heard them, every crack in their faith, every fear. The braid frayed. Their link recoiled like an overloaded circuit. Screams burst across the spiral edge. The stepmom dropped her Bible, pages smoldering as if from inside. The HR man clutched his head, jargon dying in a hiss. The deacon spat blood that steamed on the grass. One by one, their bodies spasmed. Fissures spidered across their faces, and their link fried them from the inside out. They collapsed in ash where they stood. Silence fell. Only the hiss of salt in the wind remained. Then she stepped forward. White blonde hair catching the moonlight, face whole, luminous, untouched. My birth mother, not shattered, not ash, not gone, alive. She smiled, and it felt like the field leaned with her. "Adam," she whispered. She crossed the salt line as if it wasn't there. My breath hitched. The ash rule was gone for her. Her skin was smooth, her hair white gold, her smile the same as in the Polaroid. She glowed with the kind of health that makes you distrust it. "Adam," she said, "not Cal, never Cal. You see now what I've learned." Her hand brushed her cheek, and for a moment I glimpsed the truth. Her face wasn't solid, but gloved, a soul sheathed in a membrane of will. Where the cult burned into ash, she had found a way to stay. "You can end this," she said. Her voice was kind. It was always kind. "Let the breach take you, surrender to the crown, and I will take what's left of you, hold it safe inside me, a mother's duty." The crescent in my chest knocked hard, aching to agree. My knees almost buckled. Her eyes glistened. "You don't have to fight anymore. One touch, one choice, mercy." The words clawed at me, but something else stirred memory. Dad's laugh, hoarse and clumsy after fixing the lawnmower. Mom's grocery list taped to the fridge in blue marker. The Menominee teacher's lullaby, soft syllables curling like smoke. I realized her trick was emptiness, a vacuum where only the crown could echo. The only defense was noise. I opened the channel not to her but to every story I could hold. My father's laugh thundered in my ears. My mother's handwriting looped across my eyelids. The lullaby wrapped around my ribs. I jammed them into the breach, clutter and all, until her voice warped. She grimaced, her luminous skin twitching like a cracked screen. "Stop," she hissed. I shouted back, not in prayer, not in catechism, but in human mess. He always bought the wrong cereal. She always forgot the coupons. She always hummed off-key. The crescent under my sternum shivered. For the first time since the attic, it didn't push outward. It pulled. My chest compressed as if gravity had turned inward. The paper rules taped to my shirt curled, tugged toward the glow beneath. Her face went rigid, eyes wide with recognition. No, not in, out, it must go out. But the moon inside me had decided otherwise. I came back to myself on a varnished gym floor, the kind that holds faint echoes of dodgeball and church lock-ins. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The air smelled of pancake mix and floor wax. Someone had left a folded blanket over me. A water bottle sat by my head. My chest ached where the paper rules had been taped, but the knock was gone. 3 days had passed. I didn't ask how I knew, I just did. When I found the courage to return to County V, the field was not grass anymore. It was glass. A smooth, fused sheet that stretched from fence to co-op ruins, glinting under a gray sky. No footprints, no ash, just a bare reflection as if fire had licked the world clean. I carried the hollow crown with me, its cover bent and water-stained. I flipped the pages. No sigils, no catechism. Just empty motivational slogans and blank margins, like any other bad self-help book abandoned in a church basement. The silence of it was louder than any chant. At a diner booth in town, I borrowed a ballpoint pen and began to write on a yellow legal pad. Not gospel, not rules chiseled in stone. Just a handbook for kids who feel eyes on them in hallways, on buses, in pews. Page 1 was the only rule that mattered. Tell your story out loud. It makes less room for theirs. Weeks later, I passed a laundromat in a town too small to matter. Inside, a father and son leaned over a chessboard balanced on a detergent box. The boy tapped a knight forward, brow furrowed. His father chuckled, patient. The soda machine hummed steady in the corner. And outside, through the wide glass windows, I saw snow. Falling quiet, settling thick, clinging finally to the ground of County V.